Today, we're going to talk about something called Operation Metro Surge. It was a massive federal operation that basically turned the city of Minneapolis into a conflict zone. We're talking about a story that pitted citizens against their own government and ended in a pretty dramatic legal showdown. But here's the thing, to really get what happened, we're not going to start at the beginning. Nope, we're jumping right into the middle of the fire, to the exact moment a federal judge's decision brought the whole thing to a screeching halt. Take a look at this quote. An ongoing, persistent pattern of chilling conduct. Those are the words of U.S. District Judge Catherine Menendez. And let me tell you, when a federal judge uses words like chilling conduct to describe what federal agents are doing, you know something has gone seriously wrong. And those words, they weren't just for show. They had real power. The court immediately issued an order that blocked federal agents from arresting or using things like tear gas and rubber bullets on peaceful protesters. So you have to ask yourself, what on earth could have happened in Minneapolis to make a judge take such a drastic step? Well, to answer that, we've got to rewind. Let's go back to the start and see how this whole thing kicked off. So, this is it, Operation Metro Surge. On paper, according to ICE, that's U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the whole point was pretty straightforward: find and deport undocumented immigrants in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. It all started back in December of 2025. But the scale of this thing, it was just staggering. 2,000. That's how many federal agents were sent to the Twin Cities. Just let that number sink in for a second. 2,000 agents. And if that number sounds huge, it's because it was. In fact, the Department of Homeland Security itself said it was the largest immigration enforcement operation ever carried out. So we're not talking about a routine action here. This was something America had never seen before. And when you deploy that many agents with that kind of mission, well, conflict is almost inevitable. The tactics they used and just the sheer number of boots on the ground led to some really explosive confrontations. The whole situation just spiraled out of control, fast. And I mean really fast. Look at this timeline. The operation starts in December, and right away, you see reports of U.S. citizens being harassed. Then, January 7th, this is the flashpoint. An ICE agent shoots and kills Renee Good, a 37-year-old American citizen. The very next day, protests erupt. A week later, another person is shot. And just 2 days after that, the court finally steps in. It was an incredibly rapid and tragic descent into chaos. And you can see how this affected the entire community. It was felt everywhere. I mean, we're talking about agents walking into a hospital without a warrant. A 55-year-old citizen getting detained just for asking, "Are you ICE?" Agents were even accused of threatening people by bringing up Renee Good's killing. A pastor was arrested near his church. Businesses like Target were raided. This went way beyond just targeting undocumented immigrants. It touched everybody. Okay, so while the city was just reeling from all this, a second battle was kicking off. This one wasn't fought in the streets with tear gas, but in courtrooms and press conferences, with lawsuits and political speeches. Two big legal challenges popped up, and they were both basically asking the same huge question. Was the federal government going too far? You had the state of Minnesota, along with Minneapolis and St. Paul, arguing that sending in all these agents without their consent was straight up unconstitutional. And then you had the ACLU, who filed a lawsuit claiming there was widespread racial profiling and illegal arrests happening. The state's governor, Tim Walz, he did not mince words. He called the whole thing a campaign of organized brutality against the people of Minnesota by our own federal government. I mean, wow. That shows you just how broken the relationship between the state and federal government had become. But, the federal government saw it completely differently. The head of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, she defended the operation. She said that so-called sanctuary cities like Minneapolis are extremely dangerous for American citizens. So you've got these two totally opposite views of the exact same situation. And the federal government just kept dialing up the pressure. The White House actually threatened to use the Insurrection Act. That's a super old, rarely used law that would let the president send in the military against citizens. At the same time, the Department of Justice started investigating the governor and the mayor for supposedly getting in the way of federal agents. This wasn't just a disagreement anymore. It was a full-blown constitutional crisis. So here's the really crucial point. What happened in Minneapolis wasn't just a local story. Not at all. It brought up these huge, fundamental questions about the limits of federal power and the rules that are supposed to control law enforcement all across the country. Which leads to the big question, right? What are the official rules? I mean, there have to be some guidelines for an operation this massive, don't there? And the answer is yes, of course there are. These are the Attorney General's own guidelines for this kind of thing. They say agents have to use the least intrusive method, they have to respect First Amendment rights, and everything they do has to follow the Constitution. And when you put these rules right next to what was actually happening on the ground in Minneapolis, well, you can see the massive disconnect that started this whole legal war. And that really brings us to the core question at the heart of this whole conflict. All the events in Minneapolis force us to ask a really tough question about our democracy. Where do we draw the line between keeping the nation secure and protecting our own individual freedoms? And maybe even more important, who gets to draw that line? There's no easy answer, but it's a question we all have to grapple with.